Hello everyone, this is my build guide for Demigod's Wrath, a build that I created sometime last league and refined a lot this league. Before we get into the meat and potatoes, this will be a long-form video guide going over how every mechanic works in the build along with the gearing options and what to expect from the endgame. Let's start with the crux of the build, the Eternal Apple. It provides us with some life, chaos res, and Warcry CDR, but has the additional effect of triggering a Warcry upon reaching maximum endurance charges, and losing all endurance charges upon reaching max. This means, by default, it would take us 3 endurance charges to activate a single Warcry in this item, which is highly inefficient. There are 2 ways to manipulate this problem. 1. Use the Fragility unique jewel to reduce your maximum endurance charges, or 2. Increase your minimum endurance charges. Unfortunately, due to a bug, it is impossible to effectively use 2 fragility jewels, meaning we have to use at least 1 minimum endurance charge to make the build function. You can get these minimum endurance charges through 2 means. Crafting a minimum endurance charge on your amulet or rings, or allocating the Disciple of the Unyielding notable. The ideal setup for our build is 2 minimum endurance charges for additional elemental resistance and physical damage reduction. Now that we can activate our shield's effect upon receiving an endurance charge instead of multiple, we need a way to activate it consistently. Using Enduring Composure from a small cluster jewel, we can generate an endurance charge every second if we've been hit recently. Many builds currently use this to generate free charges while mapping, making a 2 passive small cluster with this on it fairly expensive. It is generally in your favor to buy a base that can hit the Enduring Composure notable and craft it yourself with the ults you find. I would recommend trying to get this before you consider making the build, as it is incredibly important to maintaining the Eternal Apple's Warcries. Now that we have the means to constantly gain endurance charges, we need to get it consistently. The only way to do this is to hit ourselves through a unique item. There are a handful of items that can do this, but there are only 2 applicable in this circumstance. Skuld's Bridle is the go-to for self-hit builds, as it doesn't have any massive negatives, but it also doesn't have any decent positives. The other option is Gluttony. It gives us a handful of solid stats, including Culling Strike, while also nullifying our armor and energy shield. As we don't stack both, this is fairly inconsequential. Both are viable options, but in order to get the boasted 57% increased character size, you need to be using Gluttony, as it is far more difficult to get our helmet enchant on Skuld's Bridle. I would only suggest considering Skuld's Bridle if you are considering speed farming maps with Legion encounters and are using a Headhunter. Otherwise, it is a clear speed loss. Since we now have the means to constantly and consistently gain endurance charges, we can now build around the fact that we will be activating a Warcry every second. The Warbringer Ascendancy node provides 10 rage for every 5 power a Warcry has while under 25 rage, sacrifices 10 rage while above 25 rage, and gives our exerted attacks a 50% more multiplier if we've sacrificed rage recently. Combined with the Cry Wolf notable from a medium cluster jewel, we can generate 20 rage every second while under 25 rage, despite how many enemies are nearby, providing yet another layer of consistency to our build. While near a unique enemy, we will get 50 rage instead, allowing us to reach the coveted 90% uptime on Berserk. With the Warcry and rage mechanics out of the way, we can now talk about the shrine mechanics. As many of you probably already know, Plunderer plus the Goal is a very powerful combination of uniques that many people have already slapped into their builds. Despite this, I'll still explain how it works. Plunderer is a unique item that boasts no powerful stats immediately, with a colossal strength requirement probably taking you by surprise. This item grants you the Lesser Massive Shrine and Brutal Shrine, which provides a cumulative 10% increased character size, 20% increased damage, area of effect, maximum life, and stun duration. We will always have these shrine buffs, so it only makes sense to run the Goal to boost these effects even further than Plunderer does by default. At 150% increased effective shrine buffs, we get a total of 25% increased character size, 50% increased damage, area of effect, maximum life, and stun duration. In order to combat this strength requirement, you need either an extremely powerful amulet, like mine, or use an amulet with upwards of 120 strength and allocate utmost might. Once you meet the strength requirement, you will most likely hit another wall with dex and int. These are difficult to juggle sometimes, depending on your gear, but it is something you will eventually overcome with jewels and acquiring a better amulet. With all of that out of the way, let's talk about how we can effectively perma-stun Cirrus. Most people probably don't even know how stuns work. I didn't until I looked into it. It goes like this. An entity's stun threshold, including you, is based off of 10% of their maximum life. So if you take 10% of your max life, you will be stunned. Makes sense. This is why if you don't have stun immunity while mapping, and if you get caught in a group, you will be stunned repeatedly until you inevitably respawn in your hideout. Reduced stun threshold effectively reduces how much maximum life the entity has for calculating stuns. This means that if you have, say, 50% reduced enemy stun threshold, instead of the enemy being stunned at 10% max life, they would instead be stunned at 5%. And if you have 75% reduced enemy stun threshold, they would be stunned at 2.5%. Now, after 75%, there is an equation to be able to calculate your effective stun threshold. With equations like these, it's pretty easy to get lost in the numbers and not really understand what's happening, but just understand that because we have 95% reduced enemy stun threshold, we effectively have 86.1%, which means that all we have to do is do 1.39% of an enemy's maximum life to stun them. Cirrus has just a smidge over 70 mil life, which means that if we do a 973k hit, it is very easy to stun him, as we will typically hit for about 1.3 mil. Now there's a caveat with all of this. I did say effectively perma-stun Cirrus earlier. Unique bosses have a very fun mechanic where if they get stunned, they're immune to further stuns, and are immune to stuns for 4 seconds afterwards. Now it might seem like a 20% uptime is a straight scam, but when you consider the time between Cirrus's attacks, you realize that he's basically setting himself up to be stunned again in the middle of one of his attacks. If you're looking for by far the easiest boss kills ever, abuse stuns with a build that hits hard like this one. The first few times I fought Cirrus with this build, I had hyped him up as a horribly difficult encounter, but then the Crab Claw came in clutch and made this boss so easy. In our 6th link, we run Earth Shatter because we can reliably explode the spikes summoned by the skill, massively increasing our damage output. Our links are fairly standard. If you're fighting a boss like Cirrus, where you will spend more time running around instead of attacking, you can replace melee physical damage with Fist of War. It makes no difference while mapping, but for bossing it can make the world of difference. For our first 4 link, our auras are standard, as with all melee builds. Blood and Sand provides a massive AoE more multiplier, along with the ability to swap to a more area damage multiplier. Flesh and Stone, linked with Maim, causes nearby enemies, while in Blood Stance, to take 30% increased damage. Dread Banner caps our impale chance while giving us increased impale effect, making our impales do more damage. For our second 4 link, our cast when damage taken setup consists of a Chaos Golem for physical damage reduction, Immortal Call to protect against deadly multi-hit attacks, and a curse between either Punishment or Warlord's Mark. Punishment is better for mapping, while Warlord's is better for bossing. For our third 4 link, it will consist of a Second Wind support linked to a Phase Run or Dash, Berserk, and Enduring Cry. This maximizes the effect of the CDR we get from Second Wind, while also giving us more reliable defensive layers and increasing the uptime on Berserk. In our apple, the war cries are self-explanatory. We net massive damage, AoE, and get a 100% double damage modifier as a result. The final gem links are a Herald of Purity, a Val Ancestral Warchief, and a choice between Blood Rage for mapping and multiple totems for bossing. If you have any questions, feel free to post to my thread in the comment section below, or go to Global 8100 and ask me there. Now go out there and flex on them aura stacking meta cucks.